Right guys, going to give you a bit of a lesson now on a bit on ohms, a bit on power from amplifiers, also talk a little bit about powered speakers. Now on the whiteboard at the moment, imagine that is your mixer. That's like the reception, let's say, of all of your kit. Without a mixer you can't really do much, you can't bring volume up or down. CD player here and laptop. The reason I've got those there is that's where our audio is coming in, so that's our music source. And here the mixer, that's the place where we can start to change the sound of the music source. We can either increase it, decrease it, we can bring in bass, mid, treble, do whatever we want. That's all great, but then of course we need something to amplify that sound. Now there are two ways of amplifying the sound. One is to use something called a powered speaker. Now you notice from my mixer I will go from the output of the mixer directly into the powered speaker. There's no need for anything in between. There's no need for any amplifier or anything, because the amplifiers will be, or amplifier, it depends if it's just one speaker or two. Some of the cheaper models will have one amp that will power all the speakers inside, but the good quality powered speakers will have two amplifiers or three or four, depending of course if it's a two-way, three-way or four-way speaker. So you go from your music source to your mixer to your powered speaker. Let's talk a little bit about ohms. Now the sign for ohms is like that. It's OHM. Now what you will find is when manufacturers make a powered speaker with amplifiers inside, the amplifiers will work perfectly for that speaker. Everything in that box is made for the purpose of making the sound. So you won't all of a sudden find a powered speaker and some muppet out there has put a too powerful amplifier in, so as soon as you turn it up it's going to explode. Everything is made for the purpose of that one unit. Now let's imagine now you haven't got a powered speaker. You've got a passive, P-A-S-I-V-E, a passive speaker. Now the passive speaker has got no amplifier in it at all. What it might have is a crossover, a passive crossover. We'll talk about crossovers in a little bit. So let's go back to our CD and our laptop. We've got our music over here. The music is going into the mixer. From the mixer now we need to somehow amplify that signal. When it comes out of that mixer, it's not a sound, it's an actual signal. So that signal needs to be amplified by amp, which is short for amplifier. Now that amplifier could be any amount of power output. It's entirely up to what you buy, but also the power that the speakers can take. Now the one thing you need to look at when buying speakers, the most important thing, is the RMS. That is the important bit. Some speakers you may see PMPO and it could be 1000 watts PMPO, and you may think, wow, my speakers are 1000 watts. Well, I'll tell you now, they're probably not. RMS is the one to look for, and also on the back of every speaker, or most speakers, you should see something like this, maybe a 4 or maybe an 8, and something that looks like that. Now that will tell you that your speakers are either 4 ohms or 8 ohms. Now let's imagine my amplifier here is a stereo amp, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to put a line down there. I'm going to put R for right and L for left. Now my amplifier is 500 watts a side, RMS. 500 RMS watts per side. So my amplifier is 1000 watts, 1000 watts, also known as 1K. 500 watts a side, and this amplifier, and most amplifiers you will find, are 4 ohms, so 4 ohms. But again, check the back of your amplifier. Now this speaker here is 500 watts. But this speaker is 8 ohms. Right, now we've got not an actual problem, but some people think that because their speaker is 500 watts and the amplifier is 500 watts aside, they actually think they're going to get 500 watts into this speaker. Well, you're not, because the ohms are higher and the ohms are lower here. So what you will actually get is around about 375 watts into this speaker. Ideally, what you need, if I just scrub that out, if that speaker there was 8 ohms, ideally maybe this speaker should, let's say, be 300 watts at 8 ohms. Now straight away we've got a 500 watt amp, 300 watt speaker, 8 ohms. But what you can do is you can have another speaker, we'll put another one down here, the same one, and this one's 300 watts. Now if this one here is 8 ohms as well, what happens, this is the crazy thing about ohms, when you add 8 and 8, you don't get 16, you actually get 4 ohms. So what we've got 300 and 300 will now equal 600 watts at 4 ohms. So we've got 600 watts capability RMS power, and we've now got a 500 watt amplifier. So really our amplifier now is maybe underpowering the speakers. Now this is where it doesn't really get technical. It's more so common sense. Now you may think, alright, we should have a 600 watt aside amp. Now I do agree with you, yes, because the amplifier is complementing the speakers perfectly. But the trouble is, this amplifier will only be able to give 600 watts aside RMS each side. That's all it can do. There's no headroom. Now headroom, the terminology there in the music industry, is the area where there's space for movement, and sometimes to have space for movement is really important. So ideally it would be good to look at maybe getting an amplifier, again 300 is 600 watts RMS, maybe consider getting an amplifier maybe 800 watts aside at 4 ohms. So 600 watts, 7, 8. So you've got 200 watts of headroom. Also, this means that when this amplifier is running at its full potential, pushing 600 watts out, there's 200 watts of headroom, but also the amplifier isn't running too hard. I'll give you an analogy. Let's imagine having a Mini that will do 80 miles an hour, and that's at top speed, and you've got a Porsche that will do 160 miles an hour. If you have the Mini doing 80 miles an hour, full throttle for an hour, but you have the Porsche doing 80 miles an hour for an hour, the Porsche will just tick over nicely because it can go a lot faster. Whereas the Mini, even though it will do 80 miles an hour, it's going to be struggling after a while to try and keep up to its optimum speed. Alright? So this is video number 1, a little bit of an insight into how powered speakers and non-powered speakers work. I hope that's been a help. There'll be lots more of videos like this. Practice and enjoy.